Democratic member of the House Intel Committee, Congressman Mike Quigley of Illinois. Congressman, thanks for spending time with us this weekend. You said the public would want you to go full throttle if they had seen what you had seen during the House investigation into Russia's interference in the election. We now know we have the first indictment coming from the Mueller probe. Have you learned anything that the public would feel is worthy of an indictment?
I believe that there's evidence of collusion. I believe that there are Trump associates who, obviously, we know many that reached out to Russians. I mean, Roger Stone, Alexander Nix, the president's son. What was his expression? Oh, if that's what it is, I love it. Peter Miller. The list goes on. Mr. Kushner. Those are at least 5 examples before, during, and after the election with Trump associates reaching out to the Russians to work on something, obviously, against Hillary Clinton. So I think I've seen enough for the investigation to move forward. It's obvious the Republicans don't like the investigation because it's embarrassing. It makes them look bad. And frankly, it puts many of the people in the Trump world at legal risk, as we're seeing tomorrow.
As I mentioned at the top of this segment, Republicans in both the House and the Senate have talked about a swift conclusion to their congressional investigations. Now, with this indictment, is that going to impact anything as far as your committee goes?
Look, I think our committee should continue the investigation. No longer than it should take, or no shorter. When people ask me, however, are you connecting the dots? The fact of the matter is, as we find more and more dots become evident, right? Once you interview one person, it becomes obvious that you should interview 3 others. The Watergate investigation took over a year, and the Democrats were in control of the House and Senate. This is a far more complicated investigation than Watergate, obviously because it involves a foreign counterpart to it. But it is probably calculus to Watergate's algebra. This is something that strikes at the very heart of our democracy. Let's remember that boards of elections were hacked into. The very core of the credibility of our elections is at danger. And you could easily imagine, if you're a hardcore Republican, that the tables could have been turned, that the Russians could have been trying to target a Republican candidate to benefit a Democrat. If you believe in democracy, it shouldn't matter who was targeted. The fact is the democratic process was targeted. Get past the partisan part. This isn't Benghazi Part 2. This is something that we should all take a look at because it's so critical to our very core.
And you brought up the partisan nature of what appears to be the House Intel investigation. I mean, people have criticized your committee's politicizing of the Russia investigation. How confident should the public be, or how can you expect the public to be confident in any conclusions that come from your committee?
Look, I think that there's a core group of Democrats and Republicans trying to follow the facts to get to the truth wherever it may be. I think Mr. Conaway from Texas is trying to do that on the Republican side. It isn't easy when the White House from the very beginning has called it a witch hunt and denied the intelligence community's consensus that the Russians hacked into the process to help one candidate over another. And oh, by the way, shortly thereafter said that President Obama wiretapped Trump Tower, which is obviously an outright lie, something he read on Breitbart and talked about. That is just the beginning of a long series of attempts to distract, delay, and eventually, I believe, evidence of obstruction. The fact that he directed Mr. Comey to not investigate Mr. General Flynn, that he fired him for that Russian thing. These aren't small matters. He's simply hoping that if there's a shiny enough object out there, the American public will pay attention to this and help his 38% approval rating.
Now, John Podesta, who we know was the head of the Clinton campaign, and Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who was the leader of the DNC during the election, they both say they had no idea that the Clinton campaign and the DNC, under their watch, were funding that dossier looking into President Trump's connections to Russia. We learned that this week, but do you buy that they had no idea about it?
I have no idea. I think what we knew from all along was what the original part of the dossier was paid for by a Republican think tank and Republican candidates. Apparently, that was taken over by Democratic interest. The fact of the matter is
just hold your thought for 1 second, because we actually did confirm that that Republican entity was the Washington Free Beacon, and they are a conservative media outlet. They say they initially funded some research, opposition research, into then candidate Trump. So just wanted to get that out there, because that is some new information we got.
Sure, shock and surprise, people do opposition research on their opponents. The fact of the matter is the crux of what came out of that dossier is what the intelligence community has reached a consensus on. And the dossier did it first, that the Russians attacked our democratic process to help the Trump campaign and to hurt the Hillary Clinton campaign. That's the most important thing to come out of it. The bottom line is, we're not investigating that as a committee. We're investigating 4 prongs of what took place. What did the Russians do? How did they do it? How do we prevent it from happening in the future? And what about the leaks that are taking place? It's not, is the dossier correct or not? The fact of the matter is, a large part of it is correct.
Well, and some of it still hasn't been corroborated. Intelligence officials have also said that it isn't just the dossier that has given them some kind of evidence about Russia's involvement in the election. So that aside, you could eliminate the dossier, they would still be doing this investigation, they say. Congressman Mike Quigley, we're out of time. Thank you so much for joining us.